There's a lot of noise in the AI space. It feels like there's a new tool coming out every week, a new feature coming out every day, massive funding announcements and startups spinning out. And it feels like a lot of this content online is made by people who live inside those tools, maybe because it's in the job description, or maybe because they have a lot of time to experiment or access to the highest subscription tiers. There's also a discourse around the future of AI and its impact on the economy and society at large. And at the same time, there's a massive gap between that and where 95% of people, particularly non-technical professionals, and how they use some of those tools. This is probably an overwhelming space to navigate, especially if, and maybe even a bit stressful if people are feeling like they're left behind or there are capabilities that they are leaving on the table or haven't tapped into properly. What I'm going to try and do today and across this series is offer a foundational framework and process to build those agentic workflows or agents, which we'll talk about, to try and tap into some of those additional capabilities. And I will reinforce the framework with not live, but semi-live demos and examples, and I'll share it with the community of learners. So this will be a very much communal effort to upskill each other. Okay, the 4 building blocks of every AI workflow. You definitely heard AI agents a lot, or agentic workflows, or AI native workflows. And there's no real definition of what those things are. But what I tried to do is to distill those terms into their underlying building blocks. And those building blocks will apply across different tools and different methods and different types of tasks. And the goal is to move from the normal way of using AI, right? Opening ChatGPT, hey, this person sent me this email, copy paste, give me a reply, or doing a little bit of research or uploading a PDF and asking it to do some form of analysis, to working side by side with AI. So AI that performs tasks like gathering information, making some form of decision or analysis, making some form of adaptation or modification, using different tools, then producing actual output, right? So AI that is really integrated within our personal and professional tasks. And like I said, this series is aimed to kind of bridge that gap. So what are those 4 building blocks? You have the first one, which is the LLM and the environment. So the LLM is the brain or the intelligence behind everything, right? So that's your ChatGPT, that's your Claude, that's your Gemini. And I think this is what we are all quite familiar with. The environment is where you engage or interface with that LLM, right? So majority of people have used ChatGPT, but primarily on like the web interface. You might have used Gemini on, let's say, Notebook LM. You might have used Claude on different environments like Claude Cowork or Claude Claude Code on Terminal, or something called an IDE, so an integrated development environment. So this is what a lot of the engineers and developers use. Some of those tools are VS Code or Anti-Gravity, etc. So essentially, the LLM is the engine, the environment is sort of the cockpit, and each environment unlocks different types of capabilities for the LLM. We'll go through this in more detail. Memory and knowledge. This is essentially all of the contextual information that you give your LLM beyond its training data, right? So when you upload a PDF or an Excel sheet, or you're adding to the LLM's memory and knowledge, and you're giving it something that is contextual to your particular task, or to you individually, or to your company, etc. So you're expanding its domain knowledge. Tools, think of these as additional arms that the LLMs can use to perform certain actions. So examples of tools that you might have seen on places like ChatGPT include Gmail or Outlook or Drive. You can connect tools like WhatsApp and Slack. You can connect CRMs like Monday.com or HubSpot. So there are thousands and thousands of tools that you can connect to the LLM to give it that additional reach. And we will be talking about some of those tools. The underlying principle of connecting the LLM with tools is called MCP, a Model Context Protocol, which is essentially a USB-C equivalent for like the AI space. So this is what enables the LLMs to talk to all these different types of tools. And then lastly, the instructions. These are this kind of structured prompts that you give the LLM. So when you give it context, when you give it a role, when you give it an output format, that's a form of instruction. You can give it certain system instructions, like how it should answer, or what tone it should adopt, what type of English grammar should it use, British or American. So essentially, it's the set of rules that govern the behavior of the LLM. So those are the different components of agentic workflows. And I guess the message here is we've all used all four, right? Sporadically, maybe we've used one in certain instances and others in other instances. But the idea here is these are all familiar to us and how we have used AI to date. Okay, obviously this is quite simplified. There are more than 3 levels of proficiency to how good or how much capability people can kind of get out of AI. But for the sake of simplification, there are 3 levels of proficiency to think about. Obviously, like I said, it's a wide spectrum in reality, but for the sake of this exercise, let's assume it's only 3. 95% of people are in level 1, right? And this is enforced by a couple of studies done by EY on like 150,000 employees in 29 countries. There's another study that was done by OpenAI, and essentially it looked at the different conversations that people were having on ChatGPT and classified different use cases. But the message here is 95% of people, if not more, are kind of foundational, basic space of engaging with AI, right? Again, this is the AI that responds bucket, and essentially mainly engaging with tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude on the dedicated sort of chat interfaces, manual inputs, one-off prompts. On level 3, you have the different devs and engineers who have unlocked a lot of the capability of some of those tools. Those are typically people at the forefront of the innovation of the technology. Some of the people that you see online and some of the influencers or content creators could be classified as quite advanced. These are people that are running developer grade, multi-system orchestration, parallel agents. Level 2 is where you have the more kind of specialized environments. It's applying that foundational framework to build structured workflows to produce consistent results, really aligned with either the personal or professional use cases. Level 1 is useful. I'm an alum of level 1. Level 2 is absolutely transformative. And the goal of the series is to try and push people from level 1 and closer to level 2. I think also I need to be realistic in saying this is not going to be transformative from day one. Obviously, there's a learning curve when it comes to like actual capabilities and using the tools. There's a learning curve in terms of figuring out like what actual tasks to try and automate or apply workflows to. This is not going to be an instant transformation, but hopefully through the series, I'll give the knowledge and the examples to really push or accelerate that learning journey is what I'm going for. One more thing I want to say is if you stick around and test some of those tools for yourself, you'll find that there is a lot of enjoyment in the process as well. And there are a lot of magical moments. It's weird to say magical, but there are moments where you feel like you are able to build something from scratch and it works, or you're able to do something for the first time that you weren't able to do before. And I think for that feeling alone, this might be worth it. But hopefully you can translate that feeling into somewhat of a consistent, high quality output. So again, LLM and the environment. The 3 levels also apply to each of the different components. Like level 1 is what people are most used to: ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, LLM. On the specialized environments, and this is what I will be covering in the series, but you They have tools like Claude Code, obviously not to its full extent. You have environments like VS Code, but then you have like dedicated or maybe specific AI. You have Lovable, Framer for making websites, Make for making automations. So again, like these are very specific, use case specific platforms. Some run their own LLM underneath. Some can integrate different LLMs. So you can have like a Gemini or Claude, and you can toggle between the different LLMs. And then on the developer grade side, you have tools like still like Claude Code, maybe on terminal, like to its full capability. You have tools like NA10, CodeWord. And again, this is not a strict classification. On the memory, like I said, the context or the knowledge beyond what it already knows. So level one, where most people are, it's things like uploading manually, one-off documents. Level two is when you connect it to your folder system, where it can read and write back into your folder system. I think that's where a lot of the unlock happens, right? Because you can have your contextual information locally in your computer, and the AI can read from that and feedback. So it creates this like really nice enrichment loop, which we will cover here, what that looks like. And then on level three, you have certain like cloud databases and vector storage, which vector storage is like an alternative way of storing information, and it makes retrieving some of that information a lot easier. And again, if you're dealing with like large databases or large amounts of information, using tools like Pinecone or maybe Supabase, depending on the use case. But yeah, mostly we'll be focusing on connecting your LLM to your computer. And then in terms of tools, like I said, the underlying principle is called MCP. Think of it as a USB-C. You have native integrations on some of the interfaces, so Gmail Drive, SharePoint, etc. And then on some of the examples that we'll see how we can connect our LLM to different tools that we could use. Some tools are internal, like running different Python libraries, which we'll cover in some of the examples, but then some of the tools are external. And then on the developer grade, you have tools like GitHub and Vercel, where you can host your code repository or your front end, and then you have like different orchestration tools like NA10. So we'll touch on some of those, but the primary focus will be on level two. And then lastly, on instructions, we've all done structured prompts. We've all done the role, context, objective format. I think a lot of people have nailed that. I think the addition here is how do you then give persistent instruction and kind of system prompts to your LLM. Examples of that are like MD files, which are like text files that are easy to parse and read. And then, yeah, what does that look like across different sessions? And then level three is something called skills, which you might have seen online a lot. Essentially, it's giving your LLM certain capabilities, which are essentially instructions of how to do things well, whether it's to write a campaign brief or how to do a financial modeling or a financial analysis, or so you can give very custom instructions called skills. You can either create them or download them from libraries to your LLM to give it additional capabilities. So this is what we'll be covering. So mainly level two, and we'll touch a little bit on level three. Well, you are here. You made it this far. Like I said, the goal is to try and move to level two across all of the different components. The way it's going to work is every example will kind of touch on these four components and see like how we're actually building towards them to reach the final output. There's a process that I have come up with. Maybe a quick note that there is no definitively right or wrong way of building workflows. It's just providing language and maybe creating a vessel where you can onboard more and more information as these tools develops and as new features come along. But essentially, we're going to build across these four components in different examples to reach a task. I've chosen the tasks mainly because these were things that I needed and things that were relevant to me, but also because I think there are certain insights that are transferable, or some of the tasks themselves are quite generic and could apply to a large number of people. So now the $1,000,000 question is, where do we actually start? I, on this series, will be using Claude Code primarily on the integrated development environment called VS Code. So Claude Code costs $20 a month for the lowest subscription, which is the one I'm recommending, and I think is more than enough when you kind of know your way around to do most things. And then VS Code, which is a free to download software. I think it sounds more intimidating than it actually is. And I'll show you how to actually download it, and it's free to download.